Need to clean up my background space. Stuff up here, man. I got shoes and stuff. All right. We're streaming. We're live. Let me hit mute on that. Hit share. We'll get right into this. We'll share it on Twitter and Facebook. God dang it. Let me just copy the link. There's other apps I want to use. There's something called StreamYard. It's easier. And it lets you do like the newscast stuff. So it'll show like your name, my name, the name of the show. That's what I'm trying to get to. But yeah, we're live. This is the Millionaire Talk Show. We've been doing this for a while, man. And just continue to elevate the culture, bring on important voices in the culture, people that are doing some really cool, admirable things. My name is Charles Oglesby, also known as Todd Millionaire, founder of the original Todd Capital Investment Club, founder of the Todd Capital Options community, also the creator of the best-selling Options on Demand course. Make sure you check out our courses at www.toddcapital.co or affordablefinancialeducation.gumroad.com. Man, we're doing some really cool things right now. But as you guys all know, the purpose of this show is to share the stories of successful African-American business owners and investors, because we believe that business and investing are the true keys to financial success and generational wealth. And with us today, we have someone who's already been on this show before. I believe you've been on this show before?
Yeah.
All right. And you've been on the Tweet Talk, of course. We're going to bring this brother. Have you been on Tweet Talk too, right?
No, I haven't been on Tweet Talk yet.
Hey,
I was on, but I did a drive-by.
All right. Right. I remember that. Cool things are happening, you guys. But this brother, if you guys don't know, I'm sure you do know, he's had multiple TED Talks. He's most notably known for recently firing his boss. So we're going to talk about that. And also he wrote a book. He already had written a book, but he's writing a new book. So he's going to detail that whole process. It's going to be a bestseller. You guys make sure you check it out. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Damn, Amazon is up crazy after hours. Before we go into this, Apple is one of your favorite stocks.
Definitely.
And, they did really well post earnings. How was that for you?
Well, they took a drop. They took a dip before earnings. So I'm back at about where I was before the dip. But all of my shares, even with the dip factored in, are still up. So anything beyond that is good news for me.
What makes you like Apple so much? Why are you sold on Apple?
I'm an Apple consumer. So I think that's really how I got started. I started buying Apple back in probably 2016. And I mean, I have the whole ecosystem. I have a MacBook, iPad, the AirPods, the iPads, the watch, the HomePod, everything Apple. I like how they integrate with one another. It's a very clean, sleek, easy user design. And I like that they're sitting on a bunch of money. Apple is sitting on a bunch of money. So I don't foresee them getting into financial trouble in the immediate future. And they just keep innovating, putting out new stuff. So I feel like it's a safe bet. I didn't always feel like it was a safe bet. When I first started, it was really speculative. But as I started accumulating more and more, it just kind of made sense. And now I'm at a place where I really don't have to buy too much more, but I probably will. I think I'm at like 902 shares cumulatively across the different account types. So once I get to that 1,000, maybe I'll stop.
It's I know Apple has talked about a lot on Market Mondays. I like the stock. it just moves so slow for me, man. So I think
It does
that
move slow.
you have to definitely have some exposure to the company. You can't I guess argue with the fact that they're putting numbers up. This company put up, when it's like $123 billion in the last quarter of 2021, which is in a quarter. Now the
Yeah.
crazy part about that is they bought Dre Beats for $3 billion, and that looks like a drop in the bucket compared to what they do on a quarterly basis. I'm definitely an Apple consumer. I love Apple products. I've just had a hard time investing in the stock, but I think that it makes sense to invest in what you know and what you use, because at the end of the day, it's a company attached to it, and companies have to sell products. And if it's not a good product, it's not long before that gets found out. So they can kind of act like that everything is cool for a while, and then ultimately they're gonna have a price to pay once people find out that it's not all it's cracked up to be. And Apple has been here for a while. They're not going anywhere. I got two iPhones, man. I be living. I got two iPhones. The only thing I don't have right now is I don't have an iPad. I mean, my son has an iPad. I've had an iPad, but I just don't have one now. I'm able to function without an iPad. It's a really interesting piece of technology.
Yeah. It's like my favorite of the products that I have, the iPad. I can't see myself without it. Um, Outside of the product, though, I really enjoy that they're pivoting, or that they've pivoted into services. They're making a lot of money off the services, and Apple is just really innovative in finding ways to infiltrate spaces that maybe not traditionally they would. I think the most recent news that I heard about them was getting into payments, and not like the Apple Pay, but being able to like pay directly from your phone on in comparison to, I think, like Square. So
Mm,
I'm just like, man, like they're everywhere. I could see Apple integrating into healthcare. I could see Apple integrating into just everything. Like they're
yeah.
just, it's crazy. Apple and Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon for sure. I like Amazon. Their CEO is very aggressive. Even though I think isn't Bezos is stepping down from CEO. I think
I think
so.
I heard that. I think I heard that
Yeah,
maybe a little while ago. But that, I mean,
pretty
that's
sure
not
he is.
surprising. You know, we get to a place where he's at. Like he doesn't have to really. He built something that can operate without him being there. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Cool. So I kind of want to talk about a current event because I feel like this is relevant to your brand. And you have Brian Flores, who was the coach of the Miami Dolphins, African American brother. There's not a lot of black coaches in the NFL, and he got fired. And interestingly enough, he didn't have a bad record. He didn't have a bad record, and they're rebuilding the team. They had some problems with quarterback, and I think he's actually had some successful seasons before this season, and he got fired. And the talk around the NFL is like, oh man, this isn't going to bode well because there's not a lot of black coaches. And actually implemented a rule to kind of, I guess, curtail the lack of black coaches in the NFL by making sure that anytime you have a vacancy in a coaching spot, you have to hire at least one black candidate. And I guess I didn't read the details of the lawsuit, but apparently he's suing the NFL for discrimination in hiring practices and essentially saying that they aren't playing fair. What's your take on that, man? Like just in general, because you
yeah,
know,
I'm
being
familiar
somebody
with
who
the
fired their
rule.
job and stuff.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the rule, and actually, there are initiatives within the corporate space. I mean, I guess it's all corporate, right? When you look at it from a certain perspective, but there are initiatives in the corporate space that mirror that rule. So um, it's interesting, definitely interesting. I just kind of looking at my own experience and looking at your experience too. You've been a huge influence on just this journey for me, creating something for you, right? Like not going to beg for somebody to follow rules or have a heart, or make a decision out of kindness, and then you have to forever bear the cross of being grateful, right? Creating something that's for you, by you, that you get to be you all the time is so important. I think a lot of as this happens repeatedly in the athletics sphere, a lot of Black men who have achieved relative success financially in that space is starting to realize that. I wrote an article a personal article about Antonio Brown was it a few weeks ago, a month ago, when he had that whole ordeal. And people were sending me DMs, black people, actually, black men were sending me DMs, and they was like, no, Rahkim, like, that's not it. Like, that you don't want to side with him. You don't want, he's not a good dude. And I'm like, I'm not writing about his character. Like, I'm not endorsing him as a person. I'm endorsing his decision to exercise self-determination in relation to his employment. Like, that's what this is about. That's why it's relative to me. And I've been a part of a couple of conversations recently. And of course, as I'm writing this book and going through the different trauma that I experienced, and even, the trauma that I've perpetuated onto other Black people as a leader in corporate America, there's it's kind of like the divide, right? You go in, you get some kind of notoriety, some kind of title, some kind of pay grade, and you have to conform to a degree. And in conforming, you lose a piece of yourself. And in losing a piece of yourself, you then project that onto somebody else. Maybe somebody that's coming up underneath you and saying, like, no, like, this is how you have to be as a Black man or as a Black person in corporate spaces. This is what you need to say. This is how you need to carry yourself. And so I was in a Twitter space last weekend, and I made the statement that some of the biggest white supremacists are Black people, and everybody's like,
that's bars.
That's the reaction. And but
it's usually like the Black people who think that they're actually working for the benefit of Black people. That's the craziest part about it, is the most pro-Black people are also white supremacists.
Yeah, I can see that, and especially in these spaces that we don't own, right? Like, and it's a slippery slope. It's something that I've reflected on. It's something that I continue to reflect on, because on the one hand, you get salvation, and a lot of times that salvation is tied into some type of compensation, monetary, right? So your intentions are pure, right? You want to go out and you want to do for your people, but in doing so, you choose to communicate the sacrifices that you had to make to get there, right? And whether that's code switching and becoming the dominant voice, or even the way that you judge and perceive people who maybe aren't as educated as you are, or maybe aren't as financially stable as you are, and just you start to kind of develop this internalized disgust. And I use that word intentionally, internalized, because I don't think that it comes from us. I think that's something that we pick up along the way. Just speaking to my experience in banking, as a branch manager, if I saw a white person come into the bank and they had an issue with whatever, their finances, their overdraft, whatever, I think a lot of the training was to react in a way that was compassionate and helping them solve their problem, especially if they had large balances. Whereas the opposite was true if a visibly poor Black person came in and they needed help. You would think that you would want to react compassionately, but based off of the way that they interact, their sense of panic because of whatever crisis they're experiencing, and the way that they're communicating to you, I have been guilty of feeling like, oh, this person is coming in to waste time. Oh, this person is coming in to be a nuisance. Oh, this person is coming in to, there's nothing that we can do for them. And it's something that, as I exercise, like I said, this trauma and writing about it and recalling those experiences, something that I have a little bit of guilt and shame around. But I think that's by design. Like, we become our own worst enemies sometimes.
Absolutely. And I tell people that's why it's called a system. When you create like a business system, one of the most important things about a business system is the system runs itself. And so we always talk about like systematic oppression and systematic white supremacy, and we don't realize like it's still a system going on. But you're looking at them, and this is kind of revolutionary, because my whole life has always kind of been like, hey, let's not focus on changing white folks. Let's focus on changing us. But if you really think about it, we have to change us because we perpetuate the system that they put in place. So they get to kind of like, what do they call it? Like throw the rock and hide their hand. I was listening to I think it might have been Nipsey Hussle, and he said that he said they know that they're the reason why we do this, why we live so recklessly. So it's like they put the system in motion, and then they judge you based off of your reaction to the system that they created. And so the only way to change said system is to change us, because we run the system now. They are hands off. They don't have to do anything. And the thing is a lot of times you'll have that conversation with somebody and you'll say like, hey, we need to change us. They're like, no, well, we didn't do this, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay. And it becomes that thing where it's like, even though it's not your fault, you're still responsible. So yeah, you didn't do it. Yeah, you didn't create it, but ain't nobody else gonna fix it for you. Right. So that's very interesting. I think that one of the reasons why you might have reacted in that way that was kind of less compassionate is also how it maybe would have reflected on you, because you are in this space and you're trying to protect your job. Oftentimes we're like one of none, we're the token. And so if this person comes in, you're like, bro, you gonna mess this up for me, boy. These folks good to us. Like, these folks good to me over here. And you over here showing up, like, you gonna mess up my job. If I'm over here showing favoritism for you, how they gonna think of me? But that's it's not necessarily true the other way around. I think that's very interesting, and it's the reality of it. And I think that that's the part of the reason why you do have to create your own space, because you can be compassionate towards your own in your own space. You can do the things that we need in your own space once you get them out of your pocket. I think that's really interesting to hear. So you're really big on mental health, but I think that the word mental health gets thrown around, but nobody really knows what it means. Like, I don't even know what mental health means sometimes. I literally had to sit back. I was like, what exactly is mental health? So what is mental health?
You're right. It's a term that's tossed around a lot. I think it's encompassing of a lot of different things. So, specific to the angle that I use, or rather that I come at, is financial trauma, right? So what is the trauma associated with how you view money, what you believe about money, what you believe you are entitled to as it relates to money? But that could be tied into, the environment. That could be tied into the systems that you referenced. That could be tied into, things that you heard or that you were taught. And it could be tied in, I think a lot of, today is tied into social media. And, I think there's this theme of the gurus, right? Talking about the gurus and what are they saying? When I talk about financial trauma, I often pick on Dave Ramsey, because for so long he was regarded as like this guy who was a guru, financial guru. I think that was like the first time I had ever heard of the term guru was related to Dave Ramsey in the personal finance space. And when I look at his messaging is inflicting financial trauma onto people, where he is saying, I had a bad experience with credit cards. Now I'm going to create this cult following that now writes off the use of credit cards. And so you hear people say, oh, I'm not going to use a credit card. I'm not going to touch a credit card. Credit cards are bad. Credit is bad. I want to pay everything in cash. And I think that's a good starting point for recovery if you have accumulated a lot of bad debt, but it's not the ending point. And so people get like fascinated with these, catch themes. I won't even say phrase, but these catch themes, and they run with it. And so I look at his practice and I'm like, man, like this guy built a whole empire on his own financial trauma and is inflicting it onto people every single day. But outside of that, I mean, you look at some of the reasons why I chose to leave my job and, the mental health component of that, and not having the freedom to choose, like not having the freedom to be me and explore and experience the different things that I was doing. There was a lot of anxiety that went into that. There was a lot of suppressing and censoring that went into that. And so I started to first not like my job or the people that I was working with, but, more importantly, and I think more significantly to the experience of leaving, I started to not like myself. I didn't like the way that I was feeling. I didn't like the way that I was sounding. I didn't like the way that I was like shifting into like this like fake person. Like I would see, here's a good example. I would see somebody's name show up on my caller ID or my email or my chat, and I would suck my teeth and sigh or whatever, and then I would pick up the phone and then I would respond to them as if like I was so happy to hear from them. And I'm like, that's fake, right? Like I'm being fake. And then I would get off the phone and it would just like this metallic taste in my mouth because I just had to pretend in this interaction. And that's not who I am. I'm very transparent. I'm very genuine. I think that's very clear through the content that I share. And so once it got to a point where I started to feel other than myself, I was like, yeah, I gotta go. I gotta get out of here.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you hear your story from the outside, it sounds like it was just like a happy thing. It's like, I left my job. But like when you hear the details of it, it actually sounds like it was not a pleasant experience.
Oh no, yeah, it was a tough decision. You know, there's that quote that goes around that, you know, choose your heart, right? It was a tough decision to make, but it would have been a tough decision to stay. I enjoyed the money that I was making. I enjoyed, you know, for all practical intents and purposes, I was a rock star. I got a bonus every year. I got a raise every year. I was paraded in front of, you know, up as high as the CEO. People know who I was.
Why were they still giving you a hard time then?
So the manager that hired me was not the manager that I ended up leaving. So there was a change in leadership. There was a change in the organizational structure. So the company that I was working for was going through a merger at the time that I left. And the manager that I ended up reporting to just had some vendetta with me. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I just had my shit together, right? Like a person who I worked with, a colleague of mine, had shared with me that the person that ended up becoming my manager had come up to them and I was like, man, Rahkim's always on his game. And it was the statement was made under the guise of like a compliment, but it wasn't a compliment. It was, why can't I ever catch him slipping? Right. And so I felt like there was a active effort to catch me slipping or put me in situations where I could mess up so that then she could, you know, get the satisfaction of being like, I knew it. And it happened multiple times over. So here's like the power play. Once I stopped focusing on chasing a promotion, chasing a raise, chasing a bonus, essentially deferring my power of progression to, you know, this person. And I started focusing more of my efforts on the things that I was building outside, the TED Talk, the books, the publications, the conferences. As I would share those things on my LinkedIn where we were connected, that's where things became a problem. That's where life started to become hell for me. So I found myself feeling like I was being stalked on that profile. Every single time I posted, I knew that the next time I had a one-on-one, which was weekly, I would have a conversation about, well, why did you do this thing? Or what is this thing about? Or tell me about that thing. And my biggest fear at the time was that there would be the perception of a conflict of interest because the burden was on me to prove that it wasn't. And, you know, working in banking and doing a lot of work in personal finance, I feel like they could have very easily made a case for the perception of a conflict of interest. And making that a case, they could have dismissed me at any time. And so I was just like, man, I don't want to be caught out here. If I go, I want to be in control of what going looks like.
That's tough because by conceding to that, you kind of you do a few different things. You kind of give them the keys to your career. You give them the ability to determine how high you'll rise or if you will rise at all. And that's dangerous, man, especially when you have like one life, one opportunity. We don't get this time back. And I think that's what a lot of people, myself specifically, had a problem with. It's like, okay, I submit to you guys' plan. I do this. I work for however long. What if I get to 55, 60 and I didn't get a chance to really accomplish what I could have accomplished because I just submitted to what you guys are doing? I never built anything. I never created anything that I could pass down. And I get all the way to 60 and all I got is a 401k. Like that is a risk that I didn't want to take. It's interesting also, and I was going to mention this when we were talking about Brian Flores, is it's tough to sometimes feel like you're disposable, even though you're valuable. And so you have Antonio Brown, great receiver, and the guy just like whatever the intricacies of that whole situation were, if we can interpret it as he just got fired and the bosses and the coach is like, yeah, you're done here, like that is disheartening. Or Brian Flores, where like even though you do well or kind of well with what you're given, which isn't much, you can still be terminated. And my financial trauma came from being terminated. It's like, bruh, like everything is going well one day, everything is hell the next day. And then you're in complete, utter panic mode trying to figure out how you're going to maintain this lifestyle that you had that a job took away from you. So I think that to a certain extent, I've kind of built a cult following around my financial trauma that is getting fired and not letting these jobs have the upper hand on you.
Yeah.
Dave Millie.
I think too, going back to this concept of mental health, it's important to talk about what conceding looks like too. Like, like you said, this feeling that you're dispensable is one option, is one angle, but I've seen like the spark in people's eyes just go away, right? Like their whole life becomes work. And, I was telling somebody recently, I said, the difference between a child and an adult when it comes to ambition is like, as a child, your ambition is limitless. You ask a kid, what do they want to be when they grow up? They're like, I want to be the president. I want to be a firefighter. I want, whatever. There's no like, what if tied into that dream. But as an adult, especially as you get older, and I was the youngest leader on my team, but as you get older, the questions of what if become more frequent. And then it's like, well, I have a family. Well, I have responsibilities. Well, I have you can't take as many risks. And so turning 30 was like transformational for me. And I felt like I was at a crossroads where I could continue on down this path, be relatively successful, and continue to play the corporate game. But as I start to reassess in those moments, whether or not my ambitions would ever be realized, like you said, it was just kind of like, nah, I want to build something. I want to try things. I could always go back to this, but I want to say that I had the energy at the end of the day to put it out there. And so one other thing on mental health that I just want to add, and I think, this is important. It's also, the term is also weaponized, right? It's weaponized, especially against Black men who exercise their own decision. So when you talk about Antonio Brown,
man,
I do not know.
And
I don't
Kanye.
know. Right? And Kanye, yep. Anybody who goes against the grain, anybody who is just a disruptor, they're labeled as crazy. And, they need help, they need this, they need that. And the media takes that, spins it. And then now you have a cult following of your own people and people that don't look like you who are calling you crazy. And I'll relate it to a personal experience. When I wrote that article for Business Insider about quitting my job, Business Insider syndicated it out to MSN. I Googled it, I found it on MSN, and I went and looked at the comments. And there's like comment after comment after comment of these people like attacking me. Telling, saying how, I left my job because I wanted to go live on welfare. I wanted to use their taxpayer dollars to live for free, how I was foolish, how I'll never get another job, how I was undisciplined, how I was soft. And these are people that I've never seen, that I'll never talk to, like hiding behind names and faceless photos that, I'll never be able to identify. But as you're reading those things, it can take a toll on you. Like, wait a second, did I make the right decision? Like, all of these people have this negative feedback about a choice that I made. And a pivotal moment for me in just kind of struggling and assessing around that was watching how white women and other non-Black people were leaving their jobs and were being celebrated as heroes, as courageous, as being
the
brave.
Great Resignation.
Right. And so I'm just like, so because my face is plastered all over the articles, they can use me as a scapegoat. You know, this Black man decided to leave his job and he's crazy for doing something like that. But this white woman left her job, and it's like, oh, she's empowered. She's gonna go out there and, you know. And so as we talk about mental health and just kind of like how diverse, we'll say, the statement is in terms of its use, understanding how it's being weaponized, understanding the realities of, you know, the stigmas of mental health, understanding, you know, what it is that we're facing internally, and being able to build community around the decisions that we need that may have a negative impact on our mental health is so important.
Yeah. It kind of leads into my question is, what do people misunderstand about you most? Because a lot of people read it and they pull from it whatever they pull from it. But like, what do you think? I guess I would just say, like, what do you think that they're taking from that as opposed to what your true intentions were?
That's a good question. I think it depends on who's reading it. I think there are a lot of people who, I'll be extremely like flamboyant in my word choice here, deify me, because it's like, oh man, I want to do what he did. And so there is a lot of pressure that came with publicizing that on the one hand, I use as fuel to keep me fighting not to go back into, you know, working spaces or for other people. But also pressure that says, well, if I need to go and get some money, like, how many people are going to be let down by the fact that I had to like retreat now and go back into working for somebody else? On the other end, I think that there's a lot of people who view this as like this brazen act of defiance, and in doing so, you know, they want my head for it, right? Like, even if I didn't personally impact their business, I've had people go onto my website and fill out the form, like writing me an essay, cursing me out about how leaving my job was irresponsible and how they are an employer of people. And like I made their life so terrible by telling my story. And I think somewhere in the middle, there's truth, right? I was very defiant in telling my story, but I was reserved in not naming names or companies, right? I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be petty. I'm just going to tell my story as it relates to me. I was defiant in making the decision to leave because of the way that I felt. I was like, there was an attempt to socially castrate me, if you will, into like their vision of what success and progression and the pace looked like for me. And I was just like, nah, like that's not me. That's not in me. But a lot of it too is just me sharing my journey, sharing my experience, encouraging hopefully other people, inspiring other people. And not from a place of like, I'm better than you, or I have more than you, or, you know, I did this thing and you can't do it. But from a place of like, nobody's talking about this. So, and more than nobody's talking about this, nobody that looks like me, that experiences like me, that is related to my age range or whatever, like, we are not talking about this. Okay. And that it's okay for us to have these conversations. So it's been a lot of volatility, I think, on both ends, as I stay very close to the media and understanding kind of like how to play that media game, and of course nurture the community that's formed around me, you know, in my journey, saying, hey, like, it's not F9 to 5s for everybody, but it's F9 to 5s for me.
What would you say is the best compliment that you received during this process?
There have been several people who have reached out to me in the same vein, go onto my website, send me an email, whatever. who have told me about how my articulation of my experience has essentially given them permission to like consider the possibility of doing the same thing. There are people who reach out to me who ask for guidance around creating their own exit strategy. And sometimes, you know, they just want to vent. I spent an hour with somebody and they just vented the whole time about how terrible their experience was and how terrible their experience has always been and what it is that they're doing to get out of that situation. They didn't ask me for advice, they didn't ask me for feedback, they just wanted somebody to talk to. Yeah. And so I think the biggest compliment is that others will allow for me to be a beacon of hope for them in their circumstances, and that they'll share that with me, because I'm sure that there are many more people who haven't reached out to me, who have been just as inspired and then just decided like, hey, I'm going to do this thing, and, you know, kudos to Rahkim. So I think that's the biggest compliment for sure.
What is a quote insult that you received that you're actually proud of?
From leaving?
Well, yeah, around this whole thing.
Let's see. Somebody called me a wilted flower. And I know it's funny to me because it's like their choice of words. They're like, oh, you know, you're a wilted flower. And I'm like, okay, like, thanks, John, or whatever your name is. Like, you're affirming my mission to disrupt like this system, right? To disrupt this attitude, this arrogance that employers and most of the time it's men, but in my situation, it was a middle-aged white woman who felt like they could just control what my life looked like. So yeah, go, you know, have at it. Like, beat me up as much as you want to, but man. I'm here, right? Like, I'm here, I'm doing my thing. And I think at this point I'm 8 months, I'm going on 9 months of this independence. And so where I get to wrestle with whatever internal struggles there are with entrepreneurship and figuring out how to make money and figuring out how to keep money and, you know, do those different things. I've been describing it lately as a beautiful struggle because it's all on my own terms. I made this choice. And, you know, if there's any power in any of this, it's that. Nobody made this decision for me.
So this is a little tweet talk. And you had a tweet that said, it was a question, and it said, how do you feel about the phrase that you have to work 2 times as hard? What inspired that post? And also, what's your opinion on it?
Yeah, so I've been really active on LinkedIn, and the content that I put up there is a little different than what I share on Instagram and Twitter. Especially for Black History Month, I've been kind of focused on bringing awareness to some of the conversations that we don't have in front of our white peers. And there's a lot of white peers that I'm connected to on that platform. So I use that as an example of internalized traumas that Black people have in corporate spaces, because sometimes it's stated verbally, but a lot of times it's not. Like, nobody in my family ever told me that I needed to work twice as hard to be just as good. But somewhere along the way, I must have heard that and I internalized it. And I felt like I had to show up and be like the best version of me and not swear, even though everybody around me was swearing, and not show my tattoos, even though people had tattoos, not wear earrings, because, you know, I didn't want to give any reason to be viewed as unprofessional. And so really kind of just redefining what is professionalism, but also allowing us to be in those spaces and be ourselves is the whole mission behind that message. So I posted it on LinkedIn and I said, all right, I'm going to bring it on over to Twitter, make a poll around it, and see how people feel, like validate this statement, this experience for me. How do I feel about it? I think it goes back to the beginning of this conversation where we talk about like we're our own worst enemies, right? We're perpetuating the system, because you'll never hear a white person say that to a Black person, but you'll definitely hear a Black person say that to another Black person. And so I think it's important that we're very self-aware in those spaces around how we perpetuate those traumas onto others and ourselves, and how we internalize statements like that to go into workspaces and overwork ourselves just to be recognized. And sometimes, you know, to the disdain of some of our white peers, like, why is this guy always here first thing in the morning, the last person to leave, and working so hard and, you know, kissing ass so that, you know, something can happen? Like, what is it that he's looking for to happen? Because a lot of times they get the same bonus, the same raise, the same salary that everybody else is. So I think that there's some truth to it. But I think that we perpetuate that that idea more so than there is truth to it.
I have one more serious question, and then we're gonna wrap it up. You also had another tweet, and it said, and I've seen it on Facebook, or maybe not Facebook, or Instagram, and it said that the ultimate job security is to be a white man. And there is more to the tweet, but what inspired that one?
I was probably venting as I was writing my book. So, you know, this book, I've been talking about it forever. I should have finished it a long time ago. At least I envisioned finishing it a long time ago. But when I sit down to write, and I start going through a lot of those experiences, it pisses me off. Like, I get really mad, and more than mad, I get sad too, about some of those experiences. So, I must have been writing, and something had triggered me to share that. I think it's true. You know, more than being a white woman, more than being a woman of any other, you know, color, more than anything else, I think, you know, white men get to show up, and they get to have carte blanche and you know, how they show up. If they want to swear, they can swear. If they want to, like, fart, they can fart. If they want to slap ass, like, they can slap ass. And it's like, yeah, there's a lot of these rules and you know, sexual harassment and this and this and that. But at the end of the day, in a lot of these spaces, it's a boys' club. And there's almost like this sense of immunity that comes with being a white man in those spaces. You know, if I was to go in and do the same things, like, not only would I lose my job, but I probably get sued and, you know, maybe end up in jail. So I think that's where it came from. Pretty sure that's where it came from.
All right. So before we leave, I do want to know, you've been creating some other products. Can you run us through the things that you have in the works?
In the works. Okay. So there's a book that I'm working on. I fired my boss. I'm working on putting together a course around personal branding. So it's going to touch on writing a book. It's going to touch on pitching publications. A lot of people have been asking me about that. How am I getting all of these features and mentions and contributing to different places? It's going to touch on paid versus earned media. So where's the value in each? It's going to touch on public speaking and honing your public speaking skills. How do you do a TED Talk? Those kind of things. And probably a few other line items that I haven't really ironed out yet. But basically just taking what it is that I've accomplished and experienced and kind of synthesizing it so that it's repeatable, if you will. I know a lot of people are probably going to be drawn to getting featured in publications, writing for publications, and doing the TED Talk. There's a specific niche audience that's really interested in writing a book. So I feel like it's going to be pretty impactful, and people are going to want it. And that.
Where can is that going to be in the? Well, it's definitely going to be in your link in your bio, but we got to get those show notes in here. So I'll put the link in his bio in the show notes. Another question that I have is TikToks and Reels. What's the fascination with that?
I think people are really like talking about the reach, and I just want to get a piece of that. The organic reach associated with both. So I've been experimenting with different things. Lately, I've been watching a lot of Power. So that's where a lot of the inspiration from my most recent reels have been coming from. And I'm like, okay, like, this is something that I could relate to, something that maybe a cult following will relate to. and tying that into, you know, my messaging, whether it's around leaving the job or financial empowerment or financial trauma, whatever. So that's where that's coming from. I'm kind of having fun with it too, so I like it.
It actually is fun, and it gets easier
Yeah,
the more that you do it. Like when
yeah,
you're from the outside looking in, you're like, I can't do all that cutting and splicing
yeah,
and voiceover stuff. That's crazy. And then it
yeah,
kind of becomes fun. Like as I'm scrolling, I find things that I can recreate. So a part of me is always looking like, okay, I could do that one. I could do that one. And so what I do is I just save it. And I'll, because sometimes you can't like save the audio. I don't know what it does, but I'll just like record my own reel using that sound. And then I'll go back and I'll create the new one that I want. So whenever I'm out of ideas for reels, I go back to my little draft section. But yeah, reels are fun. The reach is amazing. It especially honestly, I think I've had more success on reels than on TikTok.
yeah.
Like
That's
for
another thing that I'm kind of trying to figure out. So, you know, the audiences and the platforms are certainly different, and there's some videos that I've created on TikTok that have done way better than on Instagram, and then vice versa. Some videos that have done very well on Instagram but haven't really picked up steam on TikTok. So I think it's all about experimentation. Some people have it down to a science. I haven't quite gotten that far yet.
the crazy thing is I'm looking for a picture to make the thumbnail, and you've been on everything, man. You're on Entrepreneur, Business Insider, CEO World. That's crazy. Whatever Quora is, I'm not really sure what that is. But that's crazy, man. So that's super dope. You might need to include that in your branding course to let people know however you did it, because I would like to know that. It'll be cool to have an article across all those platforms. This is a new question that I'm adding, and then we're going to wrap it up. And the question is, what is your favorite business movie and why?
Favorite business movie? Ah, man, you put me on a spot. Probably The Wolf of Wall Street is the first thing that pops into my mind.
All right. All right.
Um, just because it was so impactful in that moment. But I mean, as I continue to think, like Founder was really good. The
That was a
Banker
good
was
one.
really good. Um,
Anchor was good too.
I mean, I could take it all the way back to The Godfather. I mean, that's a classic within my own family. We talk about that series frequently, and you know, it's not like your traditional business movie, but it marries this idea of family and business. And you know, there's a lot of gems in that whole series, all of them.
I'll be falling asleep on that movie, man.
Oh man, it's a long movie. I mean, all of them are very long, but definitely, I mean, The Godfather 1, Godfather 2 is probably my favorite. Godfather 3 is you know, it has some gems too as they try to legitimize moving out of like the criminal business into like, you know, real estate and what have you. So give it another shot.
Yeah.
Break it up, take breaks, but give it another shot.
Raphael said, what can we expect from you in 2022?
Mm, man, I mean, this year started off really strong for me. I had a feature drop today in money.com. Business Insider published an article of mine yesterday. I think some other media stuff is coming out. So January and February have been strong. I'm probably going to continue just working the media angle and getting my story out there as I figure things out. I've been doing a lot of freelance writing, so that gives me a lot of exposure to different organizations and what have you within the financial literacy, financial empowerment space. But I'm just building, man. I'm just building. So stay tuned.
Yeah. They got to get you on EYL, man. That'll be cool. That'd be like next level.
That'll definitely be dope. That'll definitely be dope.
It's a story that needs to be told, and that'll just be kind of, it'll like blow the roof off, even though my podcast is better. But
yeah.
we out here, and we had another great episode. Where can they find you? Where can they follow you? And where can they support what you have going on, man?
Everything is at Rahkim Sabree. No space, no dot, no underscore. There's a fake Instagram account right now circulating, Rahkim _Sabree. That's not me. It's all one word. My website is rahkimsabree.com. In fact, my website is probably the best place to get to every other place. But I have a Google Knowledge panel. I don't know how people's getting scammed. I have a Google Knowledge panel. It has all my social medias linked to it, like my verified social medias. As far as I know, the scammers out there can't mess with that. So if you want to get to me, go to Google, put my name in the Google search bar, and then link to the things from Google. That's verified. Until Instagram and or Twitter decide to give me that blue check, that's how we're gonna have to do things.
Man, you got more than enough publications. Apparently, it's driven by publications.
Yeah,
you have to show that you've
games.
been. Yeah,
they're playing
I
games.
understand Facebook. Well, wonderful listeners, thank you guys all for tuning in to this episode. This episode is going live on YouTube right now, so it'll be up there. But I'm dropping it on Anchor as soon as we get off. So we're gonna have the Anchor podcast dropping in a few hours. So I appreciate you guys all for tuning in. We out here. We're only going to continue to level up and win and invest and put energy into these enterprises that we're building. That's really the goal for 2022, is to put all the energy, effort, and resources into just building equity in the existing organization. That's my theory, is if I can build it up, then I'll have something that's worth a bunch of money. Let's get it.
Right.
My name is Charles Oglesby, also known as Top Millionaire, at Top Billion on Instagram, at Real Top Billion on Twitter, at Top.Capital on Instagram. And make sure you check out those courses and those products, y'all. Join the mastermind. We are out. Oh, let me see how to